Good evening. You're flying with Pod Squadron podcast. All wings report in. This is Andy, Pod Job, standing by.
This is Lexi, Pod May, standing by.
And this is Rodney, our Pod Rod father. I still don't know a particular tag for myself.
But I like here. That the Rod father.
The Rod Pod father. Pod father.
All ships to attack formation. Mission objectives to talk about Star Wars in movies, streaming, animation, books, themed experiences, and your art and animation, art and inspiration from the galaxy far, far away. Tonight we will be catching up on Acolyte, so we're going all the way from episode 3 to episode 6, getting ready for episode 7, which drops tomorrow. So that's quite a lift, but I think we've just been kind of talking about how so much of this is one continuous story that I think we can talk about things thematically and get through it. But first, I'll be your squad leader for today. I'm Andy Lowe, aka the Chinese Pirate, director, storyteller, puppeteer, performer, and fight choreographer. On my wing is Lexi.
Oh yeah, I get to say I'm an event coordinator now. Hey guys, I'm an event coordinator, and I like to design cosplays that I cannot yet afford.
And joining me on my other wing is Rodney.
Hey guys, joining in, helping out. Tracy could not make it; she's having technical difficulties with her laptop, and Jason as well. But so I'm kind of joining in to kind of help out, and so yeah, I'm one of the founding members of the Geek Network, and just a huge Star Wars and huge geek. Just love it, love it, love it.
And of course, yes, the founder of the Geekish Network, because we are just one squad in this fleet. We're part of that Geekish Network, and you can find all of the content here on YouTube or on Facebook, as well as to Attack Position. We're gonna go in. We're gonna go right into this.
Right.
So, I think what we should do is we should start off with just talking about Episode 3, which is Episode 3, Destiny, and then let's kind of jump into thematically the events of 4 through 6, 4, 5, and 6. So yeah. So starting off with Destiny, this was really interesting. It was kind of our first real true flashback to kind of the origin story of May and Osha. We find the two young girls who appear to be the only children in a coven of force witches of some kind. And on I can't remember the name of the planet, but it was a kind of an introduction to another aspect of the force or interpretation of the force. What did you guys think of this coven and their take on the force?
So it's definitely not the first time we've seen. Sorry, I'm trying to pull up our breakdown and my phone's just not cooperating. Okay.
What?
Fantastic.
Oh, you got it? Lexi,
Go ahead.
or-
No, go ahead, Rodney. Go ahead,
Oh,
Rodney.
I thought it was really. I thought it was great. You know, we've had other, and I go to little caveat. I don't know as much about the Witches of Dathomir as I have not watched Clone Wars, so I'm not too familiar with that. So like seeing other sides of the Force and other Force users is fascinating to me because I wanted, that's the whole reason why I was looking forward so much to the Acolyte was we're getting away from the Skywalker saga and delving more into Jedi lore and all these in the Force lore. So seeing it is really really cool to me. Like and so I'm just like I just have nothing but questions actually for you guys. Is like are they the Witches of Dathomir? Are they the precursors of it, or those kind of questions? So I found it very fascinating. I found it also, we were talking a little bit in the pre-show, it's like, the Jedi is a religion. So just like religions of our real world, there are different denominations, there are different interpretations, there are different, and then there comes clashes because of those differences, right? So the fact that they call it the thread instead of the force, it was just like, wow, this is awesome, because it's like a totally different, they're tapping into what we know of as the force, but they're interpreting it in a totally different way, which I found,
but still consistent, right? It's interesting.
And just like the whole, and maybe I'm jumping a little too forward, but like just the whole like idea they're seeing about they chose to conceive them using the thread, but they don't exactly say how they did it. So it's very much like, okay, that's like how Anakin was conceived. It was, he was conceived by the Force, the Immaculate Conception, if you will, right? And so that whole thing, and just saying that, and just like, wow, okay. And then, but then the fact that they conceived too, just like, it's so much, and it's like I'm fascinated by it.
Yeah, they were very careful to dance around that little tidbit, but yeah, that is really Interesting. Yeah, and yeah, just to
Nothing
echo,
vague about that is about Anakin. They were about, like, all right, Anakin's thing was vague, and then this is vague, which feels intentional. At least now. I mean, it feels that we're only intended to get that much information right now.
yeah.
Um,
Well, so yeah, so kind of going back to their interpretation of the thread and some of the questions you were asking. So that is interestingly consistent. It's still different from the Witches of Dathomir, but they also refer, or there is dialogue that refers to the Force as a thread, or using the allegory. I think there was a lot of. This is one of the thing that really kind of connects me to Star Wars is the way it's connected to mythology, right? And there has been a lot of analogy or even references to the Greek muses in association with or not the muses, the fates,
The
um,
face.
with the Force Witches of Dathomir, and they're kind of playing with it. There was even in Ahsoka they had named the three witches that we saw after the the fates from Greek, just spelled Star Wars style. Um,
Yeah.
So I have to go back and see what the spellings were, because normally I catch stuff like that, and I didn't. So
Yeah, and like the way they chant, the way they
Mhm.
the markings, right? Like that's a whole thing. Like why do they have? And then there's obviously like in Ahsoka, with they're doing their chants and they're doing their rituals, and then they started having markings on their face as well, and so
Well,
there's like
and
ties to
also
that. Like
interestingly enough, that this is the second time now in Star Wars that we are seeing iconography that seems to be borrowing from Taoist duality, right? Of that kind of use of the I Ching, or the yin yang
yin yang.
idea, right?
The dyads,
Um,
like I mean, May and Osha being, a dyad in some ways, right? Too.
I mean, I don't know how I feel about the dyad theory. I mean, I know there's a
I
lot
mean, a
of
dyad in the sense
speculation,
of like yin
but
yang, the yin
yeah,
and yang of it, I guess, is more. I guess more. Yeah, I guess we can get more into that later, obviously,
yeah,
but like, yeah, the iconography, but also like there's actual written stuff too. Like she burns her
yeah.
book, right? And I
Hmm.
remember like, there was no Luke had he found the Jedi writings, but it was really ancient, and it was like the first like show of actually written word, right? So I don't know, there's just a lot of tie-ins
Yeah.
and really, really fascinating and just yeah.
Lexi, what are your thoughts here? I mean, do you think they're alluding to the concept of the dyad and trying to fill in the holes in some of these concepts that are
I
less
think
explained?
I think it could be a potentially clever move to retcon some more lore. Um, I'd be really interested to see how they go about reinforcing or expanding that. I think it's really interesting that it runs parallel to, but not exactly in line with how Anakin was conceived. In that we don't have a father, but
Mhm.
in the the quickening, how the method of quickening seems to be different in each case.
Mm.
Uh, so that's very interesting to me that they're exploring that more, because there's no way that in a big old galaxy that's around for how many hundreds of billions of years, and with all this, that you know there's never been more than one Force baby before Anakin. Like Jesus wasn't even the very first immaculate conception in mythology, in world religions either. There's other virgin births that have been mythologized before. So, you know, uh, I think it's interesting that they're taking that route. And for my money, the one thing that I really would have loved, because I think it would have I don't know. There's a lot of layers I think it would have added, and they had the budget to get a linguist or Disney. Come on, you know what I mean? I would have liked for them to have come up with a chant in another language.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah. I know. I think there's been a lot of kind of complaint about the chant being
the
kind of hokey and
it had so much potential, and it's just one of those things where it's like it sounds way cooler in another language.
yeah.
You know, like they could have easily translated it, you know, when they're doing the actual ceremony where they say it in English once, and then it's very clear from the beats to it and the thing that that's what's repeated in the mantra.
Now that said, though, I do feel they were very intentional about
I was
about
gonna let
introducing this concept of things happening in threes, right? It's the power of one, the power of two, the power of many, but
Yeah.
there's also other instances of trinities that have happened. Of course, in a later episode when we see someone die, and we'll get to that, so it's like that's not really a spoiler, but
Yeah.
there are three strikes that
Yeah.
kill that person. It also is somewhat in reference to if you ever have seen a Sith holocron, those are usually pyramids, which is also kind of that three. And also just considering, okay, this relationship of Sith or dark side users, of there is a master, there's an apprentice, and there's an acolyte, right?
Yeah.
So it's another trinity there too. Um,
But
I
in,
mean-
let's talk
in some
about
ways too, like with the Jedi, there's the master and the apprentice, right? Which like
Right.
going back to the duality or dyads, right? Or the and yeah, but it's really interesting that that's fascinating that you say that, Andy, because it is all tied together and it's very intentional.
Oh,
Now
I
that you
agree with
mentioned
that.
it, it's like all the
Well, I agree.
threes, all the
I'm 100% in agreement with you. I still think they should have done another language because having
Yeah.
three distinct
Yeah.
phrases, because having three distinct phrases is still gonna clock linguistically to people as, oh, that's and if she says it in English before she anoints them, as the coven chants it in the background, and then they keep chanting it, like we're gonna get it. If they'd said it once in English and paired it with the other language and then kept like we would have got it. We would have got it. That
missed opportunity for
So-
sure.
yeah,
So-
missed opportunity for a really cool artistic choice, but I liked the fundamental of it, and it didn't like I don't know, I was able to suspend my disbelief enough where I was like, you know what, like I'm not people are gonna so I was like, oh god, people are gonna hate this part online tomorrow. Yep, I'm calling it right now. People are gonna
Well,
complain.
so there's a number of breadcrumbs here, right? So things that we immediately observe. We meet both young Osha and young May. They already very quickly set up this idea of May is a little bit more forceful with her thread use, versus May is kind of less adept.
Oh sure.
And Osha is
Yeah.
a little less adept. They kind of set that up with the tree that is poisonous, and the little butterfly thing that May kind of just holds in place. We are introduced to their two mothers, Coral and Mother Anasea, who is the leader of the coven, right? And they hint at this idea that that the Jedi might not be happy when they find out how they were conceived, and that yes, they are the only children on this planet that they've ever seen.
That also begs further questioning. Like that kind of, I was like, okay, so there is something else going on. I mean, there's a lot going on in every direction, but that's one thing that really hit me. Like, okay,
and it's interesting too because like when they do finally show up, the Jedi show up, right? They interrupt the ceremony, and then one of the first things they say is like they play it off like they had no idea there were children here, but then earlier they were like spying on them. They were stalking. They for sure knew. So it's like that also is like inconsistent. They're lying. The Jedi are lying. And then, like we were talking earlier in the pre-show too, it's like it's also setting up, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first time we make the conclusion that May is killing all the Jedi's that were part of that, for lack of a better term, that team that showed up.
Well,
Or
well,
was
okay.
that already
They-
said in two and
May actually points out to Master Soul that they're killing, all four of you that were there that night.
that were there? Okay,
Right. We don't know what that means at the time, but
Mhm.
that was her whole thing of Soul. She's going to try and kill you too. So this, kind of becomes, the context for that. The other just kind of interesting thing I think, that they're very intentional with, right, is again their interpretation of the thread. Well, okay, so Anastasia has a really, I think, important or significant line where she's providing a lesson, and she says that others look at um, the thread as a power to be used, as opposed to how they see it as how pretty much all things are interconnected, and if you pull one thread, you unravel everything, right? Which also kind of implies, they are philosophically more collectivist, and implying, the Jedi and Sith and their opposing forces are very individualist driven too, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
which kind of fits with that matriarchy. That's kind of
Mhm.
in line,
the whole idea of a coven.
the coven,
and the power of many, right?
the power of many. I mean, also you have that metaphor that you always talk about, like with this, it's like a single thread, not very strong, but when you weave them together,
Very strong.
very,
Yeah.
very strong. So
But also, if the unraveling of threads, I've also seen and talk about, like, it's more the coven believe more in destiny than
Sure.
than like you said, the Jedi are more individualistic, right? But
But also viewing the Force almost like the fates of
Yeah.
there is a fate, there is predestined,
yeah. But it also just keeps highlighting exactly what we were saying. It's like, yeah, it's the differences, like what you see in current religions, of different interpretations of what, and then ways of accessing it too, right?
Mhm.
Of the Force or the thread or whatever. But it's like also just the interpretations of it all. So it's so I guess in this, so then that statement, like you brought up, Lexi, of them saying like, oh, the Jedi are not going to like the way they did this, then somehow there's some, I think they did say that, where there was some sort of like law.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'd been talking earlier about this, that this kind of feels, and I, what, I hadn't thought about the Clone Wars aspect, where it is the separatists who come after the witches of Dathomir, but in both cases we see these more matriarchal Force using cultures get pushed out by the individualistic focused, often slightly more male dominated Force faith systems.
Right.
And since they ally themselves with the government, then you have them enforcing that is the only one right way.
They're the cops. They're the cops.
Yeah.
They're the feds.
Well, so that is the interesting thing here. So then when we do see our team of Jedi showing up and rolling up on the Coven, right? They say, that this is not allowed, or that you're not supposed to be teaching children. There's also some banter in terms of Anastasia saying we are outside the Republic, so we're not under Republic jurisdiction. There's also some talk where basically the Jedi basically say, well, we've sensed divergence and therefore these children should have the right to be tested. And that kind of sets up this kind of interesting tension, like you're saying, Rodney, in terms of how was this established that the Jedi are the definitive only ones allowed to have their style of force usage as the definitive, like, sanctioned one, right?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's so, and then going back to like you said too, Andy, about mythology, about and then some will say that religion is mythology. So it's very much. I mean, you look back in our own history, it's like the interpretation. It's like they all believed in God and Jesus, but the Protestants and Catholics, they fought like they killed each other for hundreds of years, right? Still, and it very much harkens to that. And then I think we also talked about last episode too, or like how like Yord was, I guess we'll definitely get to Yord, but like Yord was very like the Boy Scout, right? We said that, like he's a Boy Scout. He was like very legalistic and very like by the numbers, by the law, by the the things where there was left no room for interpretation or nuance or anything like that. And I think this is also showing it as well as like, these are like somehow, somewhere, and this is, and again, this is why I'm really glad that they're exploring all this, is that somehow, somewhere, the Jedi created this order, and they came with these tenets, and they came up with these rules, and and we talked about it last week too, or last time, was that there's a reason why the Jedi fell. Is that they became so stringent and so dogmatic and everything, that it was this way or no way.
Too wrapped up in politics.
Yeah, too wrapped up in politics, got all this stuff, and then
separate the church from the state.
Right, and it's just fascinating to me. So, yeah.
That actually might be a good transition to the next episode. But before I do, is there anything else that we feel we have not yet covered in this? I mean, I feel like there's a lot, but
I think Andy, I think the multiple perspectives,
sure,
of what exactly happened that night. Right.
Yeah.
So I think
it feels very clear that this whole episode was shot from a particular point of view, and it's very intentional about what is not seen. Right.
Yeah, we're as confused as they are.
Yeah, it's like, so let's, like, to keep track, May believes that. Okay, so Osha believes that May died because she fell. She saw it. Saul saves
the
Osha.
fire, and Osha thinks that May fell into the fire she herself created,
right?
Which may or may not be true,
right? But
she also saw the whole coven dead. She doesn't know how they died, but she assumes they died in the fire.
Yeah, and then May believes that the Jedi they're the ones that killed everyone and created that and killed their home, separated them. And then on top of that, Osha believes May had died.
Well, and May also seems to believe that Osha had died as well.
Osha had died, yeah.
Osha had died. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then obviously and I think those are really the only two. Like Saul, I don't think we really got his perspective on what happened that night.
On whose?
Saul.
Oh, yes. Right.
Right. I think it's more of like those flashbacks were like May and Osha's flashbacks.
Well, we know it's something, but we know it's something more. We know it's something more than he's telling anybody currently, because he seems very guilty over it.
Yeah.
It drives him to enough to put enough anger into his fighting to hold off a really powerful opponent. And
Well, we'll get to
Which is
that
later
in
on, but
a moment. But
which
just
is later on, but yeah, he's a very interesting character, and obviously, I
And
mean, the whole
before
cast is phenomenal, but he's one of the
before we
best.
move on, can I read some of the comments? Do this thing?
sure, yeah.
So Allison, Kevin, a lot of people are in the comments. So one thing is there's something interesting. De La says there's something interesting about the critique of the Jedi, not letting them teach their children in their own spiritual traditions.
Yeah.
Right? And then she also goes on to say this series totally helps to critique and problematize the Jedi imperialism / colonialism.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what it is, right? Because they are, and then, I mean,
we also don't know where they're exiled from or what the conditions of their exile was, right?
Yeah, it almost seems like it might have been a self-imposed exile, but strong-armed by the Republic, because the Republic going, well, I don't know. I mean, we can't make you we can't make you abandon your faith, but we also can't really legally allow you to practice it here and
or perpetuate it, because don't teach children, right?
Yeah.
Now, I think we should also just kind of talk very quickly about kind of the important point of May or Osha, for some reason, has this connection to the Jedi. She's seen sketching the Jedi logo in her triangle book. Also tells Mother Anastasia that she wants to leave them and be a Jedi, and that was actually a really well acted scene too. I thought the actress playing Mother Anastasia, who's the pushover nice mom versus Coral's more protective and more hard nosed mom.
Yeah.
Right, who's not letting them have spice creams.
Yeah.
Which I'm like, spice creams aren't spice drugs in Star Wars.
Maybe that's why they're so in tune with the thread, right?
Child endangerment.
They're so in tune with the thread. That's why. No, but I mean, I think you bring up a good point, because maybe that's their way of seeing. They always talk about balance of the Force, right? Is that maybe that's their way of saying, these two that are one are attracted to different sides of the Force / thread, right? So that there's always that balance that the Force is always seeking, right? So maybe that's a nod to that. Maybe that's the thing, but then also. It's interesting too, because I mean, some of the greatest, and not to bring up other IPs, but some of the greatest, and not to bring it, but I am going to bring it up, but some of the greatest characters and some of the greatest conflicts are because these people believe in the same thing, but they go about different ways, right? So Magneto and Professor X is one of the examples that popped to my mind, right?
Yeah.
Whereas and that's why the X-Men and even X-Men 97 was so compelling, because they really highlighted that, right? They highlighted that they're wanting the same thing, except they're going about it in a different way. But those different ways are diametrically opposed.
Yeah.
Because of one is trying to be inclusionary and protective, the other one is just accepting and going into violence, right?
I mean, ultimately, it's fundamentalism that really screws, right? Any act of fundamentalism is what generates conflict.
That's a really lovely nugget. Thank you, Andy. Fundamentalism generates conflict.
Also, just feel we should mention that we do get these little teases of how powerful Mother Anastasia is, right? One, there is this kind of allusion to their power being linked to the moons of the planet, right? That's even in the logo of the Acolyte, the two rings. We also get to see her, this whole idea of when they're training, the power of one versus power of two. So the idea that when they kind of force push or thread push, whatever, that two users can merge their powers to help deflect, right, and they also kind of set up May and Osha having to do that as well. We also get to see a pretty interestingly creepy moment where Anastasia takes control of the Padawan, whose name I can't remember, but his eyes go black and he loses physical control over his own body, which felt okay. This is foreshadowing. This is gonna pay off later.
Yeah. I mean, that's really impressive because it's not like she did that to, a rank and file soldier. She did that to a Padawan.
Yeah. Anyways, any other things we feel we should before we move on to the next episode?
Oh,
I mean, I guess the cool little throwback to the Jedi testing, right? When we see them on the ship.
Yeah, that was one interesting part. Was like, he was just trying to. May was trying to get Osha to lie on the test, where Sol was just like, just tell your truth.
And her mother wanted to as well.
Yeah, so they were trying to. So, and then here's the other thing that gets about that is they didn't fight that test, right? Like they let the test happen. Mm-hmm. So that test is law, right? All throughout the Republic. It's like you have to go through that test. I found that fascinating too.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas even though they know what may happen, it's like they let it happen, even though they could have stopped it.
Well, and also it was that okay, you should do the test, but you should lie and say the opposite so that you fail, right? Which of course Osha does not do. She ends up getting sweet talked by Master Soul.
She doesn't want a lightsaber.
I know.
I mean, honestly, that's not even fair.
Weird chance or a lightsaber. Weird chance or a lightsaber.
Yeah. weird chance and your mom doing mind control or laser sword. I don't know. I know which one I'd pick as a kid, and it would be the laser sword.
All right, shall we move on?
Let's do it.
So okay, so then we flash back into, I guess, the present day, right? We know that Kalnaka is holed up on his own on this forest planet somewhere. He gets a cool little introduction, but ultimately we are introduced to the politics starting to infiltrate the Jedi Order, right? And this is kind of really interesting. There's allusions to Venestra Rowe, being concerned about the political enemies of the Jedi and the implications behind someone who was not Jedi trained, who has killed and defeated other Jedi.
Public opinion of the Jedi.
Right. And it's trying to keep it quiet as Master Soul continues his investigation to find out what's up with May or where she has gone to. This is also another controversial point. So the guy who says in episode 1 that the Jedi have been extinct for millennia, Kai Adimundi is here in the middle of this, and he sees video of May in her fight with now granted he doesn't see a red lightsaber, so he hasn't seen the Sith yet.
He said the Sith, the Sith word,
but yeah, so he has definitely seen there's a dark side user here. Which is an interesting little bit of context, because I'm sure this was done very intentionally, because Leslie Headland knew, okay, he has this line, so we have to address it. So he has to be involved in this somehow.
I've seen some talk about that, because in this episode, it's like how do you pronounce it? Chimere?
Chimera, yeah.
Chimere, he has a line where he says like, oh, you're not going to do that whole weird Jedi memory wipe thing, right?
That was in episode 2. Yeah, I know. I clocked that too.
Right, and he says that, and so, I mean, he says that for a reason, right? So,
well, he has that. He also has a number of lines where he's trudging through the forest looking for Kalnaka with May. So they heavily, I don't know. It's kind of the worst kept secret that he's clearly the Sith master, Smiler. But yeah, I really kind of enjoyed the setup of this, of how he's kind of manipulating May, how he's kind of like infusing Sith dogma in his kind of timid act, like commoner act. But yeah, like there are implications in terms of how he is manipulating May, how he's using whatever happened to her or whatever she believes happened to her to manipulate her.
But then also, could that have happened to him? Could he have done that to others? Could that have been? And then also, you said like the Jedi in Phantom Menace that says, "Hey, the Sith have been extinct for thousands of years," but then we're like, "No, they're here, and you're here too. You've seen this." So it's like somehow is there like a massive memory wipe happen? You know what I mean? Like,
well, he does. Okay, so I had a couple of thoughts. One being that he says you would call me. He did not put the labels.
Oh, yeah, we're jumping a little further, but yeah.
But we literally just said it's the worst kept. Okay, so the reason that like I picked up on the twist, is because of everything else could have just been him being like the mad scientist who really believes in the cause, right? That could have been him. But I went, he is always so confident about the master, despite saying he doesn't really know anything about him at all. So I don't know, I don't get to talk to him. He's like, but don't you think that this, like, he'd like that, or he's, how is he going to feel about you doing it this way? How's he gonna feel about this?
Right. So that's something that we should probably touch on, is that they established that there's this or I think I can't remember if it's in this episode or in episode 2, but it's specifically that the master wants her to kill a Jedi without a weapon. And of course we see that, in every fight that she's had, she reaches for the lightsaber. Last week we were kind of talking about this could be a reference to something they did in the Vader comics, where Vader had to kill a Jedi without a weapon, steal the lightsaber, and that becomes the basis for the crystal that he bleeds to turn into his own saber to officially become a Sith or whatever.
Like she has to teach herself how to force choke or something, maybe? I don't know.
Okay, so then we of course get we do have a little bit of that the relationship between Osha and oh gosh, what's her name?
Jackie?
X-22, Jackie, yeah.
Yeah.
Because we get to see a little bit more of her training at the temple. We also established that Soul is going to take Osha along on this mission to find May. And we see them assemble this whole strike force of SWAT Jedi. Or red shirts, shall we say.
Red shirts.
Sure.
With Yord, Jackie,
right.
Saul. They introduced the tracking guy.
Basil. The little otter dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little otter beaver guy.
Sniffy otter.
And of course, Yord's the one who's like studied his language and is like, he's like that kid who's like, oh, I took French, you took Spanish in high school, or whatever. Or no, yeah. He's the kid who went above and beyond and studied Latin and is like,
right.
You guys in your French and Spanish classes, I'm learning Latin. Yeah, no, you're definitely had that attitude on him.
Now, the main interesting thing here that I think happens is at some point, I can't remember where this happens, but no, that happens later, right? Wait, when does May discover that Osha is still alive?
Ooh,
Is that here?
You know what? I don't remember.
I think it's here because no, it's when what's the name? The guy that took the vow when he dies, because they're going and she sees her in the temple, and she does give chase to her, and she was about to stun her, but she doesn't, and so May gets away.
That's right.
And
so now she knows she's alive.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing. Was she says to Chimere, maybe I don't need to do this anymore. I'm gonna abandon this mission. I'm gonna go to the Jedi, turn myself in.
Yeah.
And then she, gets Chimere tied up in a rope booby trap.
Yeah.
But things turn around when she ends up finding Kalnaka. Yeah, finding Kalnaka already dead, seemingly.
With a lightsaber wound in his chest. And interesting, we didn't touch on it earlier, but I'd mentioned it, is that it's repeatedly intentionally shown that in Kalnaka's dwelling, he has paintings of the Coven's mark that goes on their foreheads, the swirling mark that goes on the Coven's forehead. I'm guessing the thread.
Yeah, he's for sure like doing his like True Detective thing where he's still researching it, he's still trying to figure out all that stuff, he's keeping up with that researching, kind of finding, and he's learning more and more about it, and but yeah, he dies, which is kind of disappointing because I wanted to see more of a Wookiee Jedi.
I know. I'm hoping that we get flashbacks of him.
We're gonna get that.
We're
definitely gonna get that.
So yeah, but yeah, same way I was disappointed when Trinity died in the first episode.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like once it happened, I was like, oh, it's like that is it. Okay,
yeah.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah, there's stakes. There are stakes. Which, speaking of stakes.
So then we have the big reveal. We see the Sith Master show up with the red lightsaber. We have a whole flurry of lightsabers igniting in different colors, yellow, blue, and green, and we get that cliffhanger.
And basically a massive force push, and he knocks all of them.
Oh, that's right.
He knocks all of them on their ass, which is like, damn, that's powerful. This guy is powerful.
So, of course, now we're moving on to episode 5, which really is mostly a fight and some good plot points, but it's mostly a fight.
Yeah.
So what are your guys' thoughts on this fight?
Still not okay. We've had a whole cooldown episode, and I'm still not well.
First of all, the fight was just, I think, is up there as like some of the best lightsaber fighting in the live action since Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
And then secondly, I, like Lexi, am so surprised how affected I was by the deaths.
Yeah.
I knew there were going to be deaths, but I
expect the red shirts.
The red shirts.
They set us up good.
They set us up. Yeah. I thought the red shirts, because they didn't even mention their names. I don't think they even mentioned their names.
Like
they even, and of course, people were commenting on like this hint of a flirtation with Osha.
Yeah.
So it was like, oh, okay, we're shipping now,
I thought maybe she'd lose a hand. It's the thing to do. You know what I mean? Like lose a limb, lose a leg.
Like,
I don't
they also gave her
0 to 100, and like it's just, you know.
Well, they also gave her one of the best like lines, of wisdom in the series thus far, where
Yeah.
May is, um
Oh, sure.
uh what is
What
it?
about
She,
grief?
she
It's what
says,
about grief?
yeah, that you're not defined by your loss. You are you're not defined by your loss, but you're defined by what you endure, or something like that.
Mhm.
Which I thought, oh, that's really cool. And
Yeah, it's
they
a
set
great
her up
line.
as being, wise beyond her years. There's also the bond of they both have the same master, so um but yeah, that totally blindsided me.
I, yeah.
It was really, it felt like Kamir was appreciating. I mean, he literally talks about how he's hunting for a powerful acolyte,
Mhm.
and they say consistently how his fighting style is erratic or unpredictable,
Oh
and
yeah, that was
right,
cool.
you also see it in the way he handles himself. I don't think his plan was to get there before May and kill the Jedi. In
Well,
fact, I think he, but then she kind of forced his hand, so he made a split-second decision. I think he was actually, because he says at one point as he's fighting Jackie, he, says to May, "You could learn a lot from her."
yeah.
And so I think that part of the reason that he dueled with her for so long, because he could have disengaged at any time he wanted. In fact, he proved that when he went off to go chase the twins.
Yeah. Well, okay, so
He was,
two.
she was gone. He was gone, and he could have probably hurt her at that point or crippled her to prevent her from following. But I think he liked playing with the Padawan. And then when she unmasked him, I think that was where the dark side user rage kicked in, and he was like, "All right, fuck this kid. I'm not playing anymore."
Okay, so three things I want to address after that. So number one, I absolutely love the whole bit with Yord saying, it doesn't make any sense. He's, his fighting style is erratic. It's like, he's not erratic. It's just you are so locked into dogma,
Mhm.
Mhm.
and you have never fought anyone who was actually out to kill you
Yeah.
before, right? And that tells you everything you need to know about where the Jedi and their hubris is right
Yes.
now, right?
What if
Yes.
I thought that is such
he didn't
a
even know what he
great
was?
little moment that kind of tells you so much about where the Jedi are.
I
It
totally
really,
agree.
at the end of the last episode,
No,
to that point, supporting that point, the end of the last or like the very ending of the very beginning of that, of either it was the very end of episode 4, the very beginning of episode 5, you see, like, you hear one of like be like, "What is that?" Or like they have no idea, even they've never seen a red saber before.
right.
No one's even really told them that that's a thing, what that means. uh yes, he's massively powerful. He took, like with what happens, but I also think there was an element of they had no idea what to expect.
Mhm. Well, okay, so this brings me to my next thing, which I thought was also really well filmed and edited, was the tactics of Chimere, right? I mean, he's outnumbered, um, and ultimately, oh, that was the other thing that Yord says, is that he gets in your head and he stays there, right?
Yeah.
So whether that's the force mind manipulation or just things he's saying, right? But he's totally pulling a Batman, right? It's like he does the big force push, pushes all of them so that everyone is scattered and separated, and there's a big dust cloud, so that he can engage like people one on one around trees, around corners, and disappear, right? Which creates all that doubt. You get some of those great shots where he's facing off with one Jedi. He stabs one, he force pulls the other one onto the and does a Jedi kebab.
Yeah.
Pulls out, and then they just pan the camera, they dolly the camera so that they're just behind the tree as he slashes and decapitates the both of them, right? It was like, oh, that was like very artfully
It was like the Austin
suggestive.
Powers penis thing, but with fire.
It's so
And then-
it
and
was
then-
so well done. Like
and then
the choreography,
of course,
the cinematography, camera
And
work.
people were complaining that you couldn't
The-
see as much action. I went, but that actually wasn't
Mhm.
the point. Like, if look at what they actually gave you, which is
But it was
your
story beats though.
Mhm.
You knew it was happening.
Yeah.
Going back to what Andy was saying, with all those camera movements and those pans and dolly movement, you still
You
knew
know-
what was happening, right?
and you
You
don't need
still
to-
understood. It was still very story driven too, right?
Well,
It's
and I
like
think-
there was like such character moments, such story beats, such
Yes.
feeling of dread. It kept building and building and building. Like, oh shit! Like the
It's
cortosis,
storytelling
like
content.
that
Yes.
alone. The
Oh God,
cortosis,
yeah.
like
the first time reveal of
Yeah.
Cortosis, where he just headbutts a lightsaber,
Yeah.
and you're like, wait,
Yeah.
Yeah.
wait, he just did what?
And then everybody's looking at their lightsabers like, what the fuck? And we are too. We're like, we didn't like, oh, this is new. Like, this is, obviously it's not because you do some more research and it's like in the EU, but now it's part of canon.
Yes, that cortosis is a metal that can short out a lightsaber. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
this is very cool.
Doesn't
and,
take
like-
it as well as Beskar, but it shorts it out.
I initially thought it was Beskar.
Yeah.
I initially thought it was Beskar, but then
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that was
doing research, going on Reddit, and then talking about cortosis, and I did a deep dive on it. I was like, wow, that's awesome. That's awesome.
I mean, when I first noticed it, I was like, okay, so is that Beskar? Where did he get a full on Beskar armor?
Yeah.
Arm, like, where do you get like a full helm from? Who made it? And then I was like, I went back and I rewatched. Because I thought that it was the Beskar that had maybe damaged the saber hilt. And that's why they were shorting out, but I realized that he wasn't at all. And I was like, okay. So then I kind of deep dove and I was like, are there any other metals that a lightsaber can't cut? And it came up with like 2 more, and Cortosis was one. And when I looked at it, it said, oh, it shorts them out. I was like, oh shit. I guess they pulled that from the EU. I thought one of the hubris of the Jedi moments that hit hardest in this episode was when Saul says to the dark side master, he goes, what? Says to Chimera, he goes, she was just a child.
Oh yeah.
You brought her here.
Yeah.
You brought her here.
Well, okay, so let's talk about the Jekki of it all. So first of all, we get to see Jekki have a pretty cool.
Real quick, Andy, you said there was
this-
3 things that you.
Yeah, well, this is the other thing I wanted to get
the
to.
third one.
So first of all, we get another kind of force foo, unarmed fight scene with Jekki and May, and that's of course a setup because that's how May reclaims Kalnaka's lightsaber. But yeah, good matchup, kind of cool use of seeing force and and Jekki being badass and all that. But then of course, when it turns into Jekki versus Chimera, and of course we establish, okay, so the cortosis shorts out the blade, but she still has a second blade, surprise, and she's holding her own. We get some dual wielding, which we rarely get to see. Actually, no, this might be the first time we've seen a dual wield in live action, right? So totally evoking Ahsoka vibes, right?
Totally.
definitely.
And rooting for her as she's actually seeming to like push him back a little bit with the double blades. But then yes, to her death, which is so shocking. But like she gets the upper hand, she kicks off the mask, and it's such a great shot that she dies, and her dropping out of frame is the reveal of his face.
Yeah.
That was just
well
such
done.
so
well done.
Yeah.
And then
well
just
done.
like but then the way, like, just the 3 is a 3 stabs.
Yeah.
Right? Like
that he's got the
Soto
Soto,
from behind.
he's got the Soto blade
Yeah.
at the base of his existing blade, which is like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and it's just like two, and they're just like, oh my god. And then they went there, and then she drops, and you see him.
And he says, Jekki, and then the first thing he says, oh, is that its name? Which is like, oh god, he was so fucked up.
I'm sorry, and I know
I
I'm a little
don't
bit
like. I don't
biased.
actually. Yeah, I think that I really think that he was uh testing the waters for any available powerful acolyte,
Mhm.
and we've already seen that he makes a spur of the moment decisions. He's great at thinking on the fly. He's not constrained by any really specific credo. So I think he was like, oh, I don't know, maybe this one would be ashamed to kill her. Kind of fun to duel her. Look at how talented she is. And then she went and blew his cover.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
she went and blew his cover. And I think that's when he was like, oh,
Okay, you
no,
did.
no.
And then,
And I think that was an impulsive move.
so
Well,
did she? Wait, and I'm messing up the two thoughts. One question: did your die first, or her? Did she die first? Jackie.
I think. Oh
No,
no, I
she
think
dies
she dies
it's
first,
it's dominoes because
right?
at a certain point he runs in and sees her body, freaks
Okay.
out, and
Yeah.
and then
He
Well,
throws
and he
himself.
has the cool move of. Oh no, that's right, because he has the cool move
his
where
own helmet.
he picks up the
Yeah.
helmet
The
Yeah.
helmet.
and shorts out Chimere's own blade, and
It's the
Chimere
first-
just cracks his neck.
Which,
It's the first time that we see him think outside the box.
Yeah,
but then also goes
And
to
it's not
what
Shinto.
they were saying about killing a Jedi without a weapon,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So he
Well,
actually does it.
and
He
and
by doing the chiropractor move.
well,
you know?
and
Mhm.
a little realignment. Yeah, there's that. Yeah, no, and like immediately he's zeroed in on the psychological manipulation of Soul, right? Kind of calling out Jackie as it. The whole what you were saying, Lexi, about oh well, you brought her here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he said she was, but it also, like you said, does kind of show that even Saul falls into the traps of like that Jedi hubris. Like you literally brought a Padawan to somewhere with a killer that you're hunting down a killer of masters.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So if you don't think that she is capable, or you're not prepared to see her die, don't bring her.
Yeah.
And it goes to what you said about the Jedi being so comfortable and so dogmatic and so political that they're not actually prepared to protect from even themselves sometimes.
And then,
I also want to quickly clock that even like with the other exchange with Chimera and Soul, where Soul's like, "What kind of master wears a mask?" and he says, "You tell
Hides
me."
his face. What kind of master hides his face from his students or something like that, or from his pupil? Or
And then also, I just really love the delivery of take off that mask, and he's like, "No," and let you read my mind. No, no, no.
so that was another thing. So that brings up the idea of like, okay, the cortosis actually helps as like a force dampening as well,
Right.
kind of like Magneto's helmet blocks out Xavier's telepathy, right? So there's that. And then two, the other thing I wanted to say as far as like and then okay, it kind of leads up to this is like he's like, what's your name? Some might call me, some like you might call me a Sith, but
A
then
Jedi like you might call me a Sith.
but like I have really no name, and so they're calling him the Stranger, which I
Mhm.
find really funny because that's what they're calling the quote unquote Gandalf like character in Rings of Power. They're calling him
That's
the
right.
Stranger. So we're not sure like if that is that Gandalf or not Gandalf, and they're calling him the Stranger. So there's that, and then the other thing that I am very biased. I have to say this because Manny Jacinto is Filipino. I'm Filipino. And my God, he's a badass, man.
And check out
He's
the
a
arms on.
badass.
No.
The arms,
Goodness.
the just like I'm converting to the Sith. I will be your acolyte. I will be your acolyte.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and then just like, my God, it's so crazy because like, we'll get into this in episode 6, but like,
Yeah.
they're straight up sexy. Like,
Oh yeah,
he's just straight up sexy, and I'm like, oh my god, this guy. And then
Darth
just like
Guns.
Dark guns, like the
I
fight,
definitely-
the choreographies, like he's a badass. Like I haven't been this excited about a Darth, character, a bad guy since Darth Maul.
Very compelling.
Like he's
He's
so
very compelling.
yeah, on so many levels. On so many levels, right? He's very, very compelling.
Lexi is compelled.
The power of the Force compels you. Or...
The power of one,
Manny.
the power of two, power
The
of
power of
many.
Manny. Please let that be an episode name for us. Power of Manny.
Yeah, so the other oh gosh, I just lost my thought. I had something else.
Yeah. Oh, but you're talking about Saul, right? So then that's what happens next. Like Saul almost goes full on dark side because he's like enraged.
Yeah.
He is like, and he's literally beating him down, and he's getting to the point where like he probably will strike him down in anger. But then he stops himself because that's going towards the dark side. Right. And or did he stop
so I'm
himself,
so
or
torn, right? It's the whole bit where you cannot kill someone who is unarmed, right? So that aligns with like the whole Yoda thing of, use the Force in defense or knowledge, never attack. But it's like, dude, he just killed everybody. I don't know. There's pragmatism. Come on.
He literally killed everybody, and he's about to kill me.
Yeah.
Look, it's preventative. It's a preventative strike at this point. It's
But again, how the Jedi are failing to dogma, right?
Yeah.
He even oh well, no, that's later on. Well, okay, I'm just gonna say it now.
Yeah,
I thought it was really interesting when we get to 6. And he and Chimera says, okay, so you kill me in like a fight, but like 5 minutes later you're not holding a weapon and now you can't kill me. Like what's the difference? Right.
Yeah.
Okay, one other thing I have to clock before we fully move into 6, but
which just
some eagle-eared folks spotted the music cue drop that there are a couple of times when Chimera appears or does things, and there is a little hint of the Kylo Ren leitmotif, which ultimately Leslie Headland confirmed but wouldn't elaborate on. It's like I can't tell you why, but yes, it is intentionally Kylo Ren's.
So that kind of gives me that was one of the questions. That is one of the questions, right? Is he the first Knight of the Ren?
Yeah, Chimera Ren.
Yeah, is he or is it the Sith? Right.
Yeah.
So it's like what of which is it? So I think the fact that you just pointed that out leads to that, or that might be a little bit of a red herring that they were. But then it's so subtle though.
Yeah.
And it's such a specific thing to red herring,
Well, okay, so that's to say the fight ends. Ultimately, Soul gets away. We have a little switcheroo where May stuns Osha, does a little haircut with the lightsaber, and runs off with Soul and Basil. Oh gosh, there was the other really cool thing. I really dug. Okay, that Osha defeats her opponent without a weapon by stringing along all the bugs that are attracted to light.
Yeah, you're right.
And putting Pip into his shirt so that he gets, right? So, so that's another thing, another little hint where, okay, so Osha is probably the more proper acolyte. Right.
That's true.
She washed out of the Jedi because she couldn't let go of her attachments to her family that died. She has so much pent up anger, and she is still vengeful towards her sister. And ultimately, she has more to lose when she finds out whatever the lie that her father figure soul has been keeping from her all this time. So she is just primed
Whereas
to be anger driven.
May's motivation was just revenge.
And then
And once the revenge was
and
lost,
once the revenge was lost, when she figured out that she was still alive,
yeah,
she lost that sort of drive to avenge and to continue on that path of revenge, right? And I think it's also a little bit of a red herring in the sense that showing that like May had more is more powerful in the Force than Osha, because I think with Osha, it's just untapped.
yeah.
I think that's a still waters run deep situation.
Yeah.
They kind of have that little illusion where May says you never could block.
But like going and then so then there was that and that was cool. So like the pip of it, the Basil, it's Basil, right?
Yeah, Basil sniffs her out and realizes she's not.
And then Saul leaves, right? And that basically leads us into episode 6, which is Saul is going to. He's trying to report back, but somehow like that was kind of unclear to me. It was like he's trying to report back, but they were having like transmission problems. But then it was implied that that May was jamming the transmissions from inside the ship, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it was May was jamming or there was just I don't know. I guess they weren't really clear on the jamming. But it did seem implied that Pip and the otter guy Basil depowered the ship to kind of lure May down.
Okay.
Right?
Oh yeah. I think that's it. But
I got about. By the way, I got about 5 minutes, guys, because I'm an hour ahead of y'all. Just a heads up.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Do you want to just go?
Let's dive in.
I think the one thing that six was amazing because obviously it was like you had huge craziness of 5 and then you get to more of like character. I wanted a few things that really stood out for me was Saul's his just grief. The acting, like you
really
see it
well
all on
acted.
His face, like you just see it, like he's going through all the grief.
The only thing that bugs me, it's been like 4 times that he says, "I need to tell you something," and then like something happens. Like, God damn it, you're really stretching this out.
And then there's that, and then the whole for the lack of the better, she's being seduced by the dark side.
The seduction the literal seduction of the dark
side. And forgive me, I'm just gonna say it because I found it and I saw it on Twitter and it was just like I had to say it. But basically, I saw it on Twitter and basically somebody said, "This has to be a first in Star Wars in canon that somebody has shown." The D to another character in Star Wars.
I mean, Carrie Fisher always did say George Lucas said that there's no underwear in space.
And it was like, you're right. And it's like it's just there. Like literally.
Well, if you're not gonna join me.
And it was so I was like so wrapped up in it because it was so seductive and it was just like this weird, crazy, evil shipping, you know, and I just thought, but that's what it is, right? He's saying, he's like, I want an acolyte. He wanted an acolyte. He's literally just like pursuing his soulmate. You know,
he also says he wants the power of 2, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, so I wonder if that's also kind of a thing of power of 1 is the Jedi or the Jedi way. Power of 2 is, the Sith way, and power of many is this witch coven too, right?
Yeah. So I think that was that, and then the fact that another thing that I saw that I and it's just a theory, but are the Jedi going to think that Saul is the one that did this? Like, so, oh yeah. So this is
Okay.
the other thing. So so it opens up a lot of questions, right? The one is like, are the Jedi going to think that Saul killed everybody? And then two, who is the stranger's master? Like, we still don't know that, right?
Yeah.
So like, and then
And
so
who
this is,
he specifically says, because I was thrown away. So who threw him away?
I think it was Ventress because of the whip, lightsaber whip.
Oh yeah.
And then the markings
Venestra.
on it.
Venestra.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's got those scars, and they make a big show of the light whip.
Yeah. Well, and we see them both like a scene apart from each other too, right?
Yeah.
Which is interesting because they do. He doesn't quite answer and say specifically he had a Jedi master, but he kind of infers or implies that my master threw me away just like you were thrown away. So I'm not sure if that's a red herring or not, right?
I don't think so at this point. I don't think so at this point, because I think that was part of the seduction too, the draw to each other, right? And he's playing on that, but like, I think there's still a lot of truth in all the things he's saying, even though he's being deceptive about the way he's saying things. I still think there's truth, like him saying like, "Oh, you're gonna do that Jedi mind wipe thing." Like, I think that happened to him, or he's seen somebody do it to somebody, right?
Oh,
like,
see, I thought that was like him messing with Soul, because Soul ultimately, like, part of the secret is he's done some kind of mind wipe something.
I think so. That's what I'm saying. Like, that's he's hinting at. He's seen it. So like, I think everything that he's saying has a kernel of truth to it. So like him saying like, "Oh, I got cast away" or whatever. I think there's truth to that. But it might be like very manipulative in the way he's saying it. But he's using that, So.
I also like how this kind of lines up with some of Mother Anastaea's stuff about this is not about good or evil. This is about power and who has the right to use it, right? So there is like still that kind of manipulation of him saying, I just want the freedom to use the Force as I see fit.
He's seeking freedom. Yeah, more than anything than the dogma of the Jedi way, right?
But he also kind of sounds like a space libertarian.
He does. But wait, he's wearing a mask. Wait, what?
But it's also the thing too, right? Like his whole thing with Osha is that they told you can forget it. It's not about you forgetting it. It's like there are other ways to access it. Your emotions make you powerful, right? And embrace your emotions, which is really just this is not anything new we haven't heard. It's just kind of said a new way, right? Which is interesting.
Lexi, I know you gotta go, but like, what did you think about the last scene when she like
puts on the mask and like just the whole like, so the homeworld being there's Cortosis there.
It bordered on body horror for me for some reason. Like, I believe they amplified. I haven't had a chance. I didn't get a chance to rewatch that episode, but did they like amplify her like breathing or her heartbeat?
Yeah, they totally evoking Vader there.
Yeah, so they did that. They kind of moved in on that, and she's like basically putting herself in sensory deprivation.
Which is also just so interesting that when we discover, okay, so there's no eye holes, so he's amplifying his Force power basically by shutting off his senses, right? Which is something we've also seen with like the training remote with Luke, and
So it's interesting because there was a lot of talk about like Kylo Ren as a villain and how he kind of fit the personality profile of like a school shooter. you know.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what made him like kind of a like, oh shit, that guy's
Yeah.
shit, you know. And this guy give you kind of reminds me of the guy who like radicalizes angry young men online. Not himself, like,
Mhm.
but the one who he says things that sound great, but have these little dog whistles that'll say don't care about other that are fundamental
Empowerment, but yeah.
themselves. Yeah, they are, like, we know, like we were saying, you know, the reason that, you know, ultimately the super intense dark side users always lose, can never maintain the power, just like the Jedi couldn't maintain the power, is because there has to be that pendulum swing anytime there's fundamentalism, because as you said, fundamentalism is like flawed and creates problems, and so you can hear his fundamentalist views in there, just kind of whispered in underneath the reasonable sounding rhetoric of, shouldn't I be able to use the force the way I want? And it sounds very reasonable, um you know, until you realize that that means it's like what he's been doing, which is also lying and hurting innocent people, and some of them have not been innocent, but he doesn't care if they are, you know.
Another thing that just struck me while I was listening to you, Lexi, was there's also a parallel between the way Osho was being drawn towards the Cortosis and his side, and being to the stranger, by the episode in which she was a small child, and she was also drawn towards the Jedi side of it than the threat, the coven side. Like there's some parallels there. Now I look back on it, it's like just the way, the longing look, the touch, the, you know, looking at the symbolism, the
It's almost
thing.
as intimate as the other scene.
Right,
Yeah.
it's just drawn towards it. So it's like, and then another parallel is those big ass moths. They were drawn to the light, you know. So these people are being drawn to these different sides or things by different motivations and based on who they are. But they're also being they're being drawn, but then also being manipulated by certain people, certain events. There's a lot of layers to it all, and I'm just loving it. I'm absolutely loving it.
And also the contrast, right? As we're seeing the two sides of this coin here, of May being on the ship with a mourning, regretful Soul, and Soul figuring out, okay, this is May, and he's called in other Jedi for backup, but he leaves before they arrive so that he can basically come to terms with whatever he needs to reveal to May. And how, you know, she still has not killed him yet, or rather she has many opportunities to kill him and she doesn't take it. She's so intrigued by his guilt and his, you know,
her
whatever
perception
his
is changing, right?
Yeah,
like her perception is changing, and bit by bit she's discovering. And it's true, it's almost like they're obviously setting it up where it's like, we thought one was going to be on one side, the other was going to be, but now they're switching places, literally and figuratively. Literally and figuratively, they're switching places, but they're also switching dogma, right?
Yeah.
Switching way of thought. And so, but I like the way they're going with this. You know, I really do.
My only downside is, they've really stretched out this Soul reveal. Like one time too many. I'm like, guys, really, just if it's okay if we just focus on what's happening on the not Octo planet. It's just like we can just be there. We can come back to Soul later. The other thing I will say is that, you know, you could kind of tell the jungle planet was a soundstage. And like, there wasn't a lot of jungle, so it was like, okay, it's the same jungle from a different angle. But I mean, you know, it was I still thought it was well done, well shot, and really kind of using this idea of subterfuge. We got to see a saber throw for the first time in live action.
That was awesome.
Okay, so wrapping up, we have episode 8. No, wait. 7.
Seven.
7
Seven
tomorrow
will be
night.
Tomorrow night, yeah.
Drops. Any thoughts, questions, hopes, predictions?
Go ahead, Lexi.
Oh no, I was gonna say no, and I am unfortunately out of time. I would probably have some if I rewatched everything, but I can't do that.
Yeah.
I started new jobs. No, I don't know. I'm excited to see where they take it. Um, I knew I knew that little moment with Saul having the conversation with Osha about her tattoo would pay off, because I think one of the things that tipped him off was he said something
That's right.
about like change, and like she didn't want to change her clothes, and I think that was the first like testing the waters where may like where he knew that he's like, well, she knows I know about the tattoo. uh, and it was fun watching them do that little dance, and I hope they play the rest of things like that, where it's that little. I didn't expect um didn't expect him to knock her out. I knew she wasn't going to kill him. She's too curious. I'm interested to see why he went away. I hope we figure out what exactly he's going to do. And yeah, no,
Yeah.
hoping we get more backstory on those scars on there. Because obviously that has a lot to do with it, and we're really intentionally, gun on the mantelpiece kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, all right, thank you guys so much. So good to see you, Rodney. It's a bummer that we didn't get to have Tracy or Jason, but we also only usually get to enjoy you as the voice of Rod, and it's actually good to see your wonderful face. Be on the show with you
Be
guys
out a little bit more. Thanks, Lexi.
Thanks,
Thank
Lexi.
you guys so much. Have a good night, guys.
Yeah.
So that said, Rodney, do you have any thoughts, predictions, or wish lists?
Lexi leaving through all the cameras out.
Yes, like I was trying to stall.
I'll figure that out.
You have a close up of me grabbing my own boob here.
I would say the biggest thing for me is I'm so excited to see the further development of the dance between, Osha, May, and Chimera, know, the stranger. And then the biggest thing for me is like I'm really curious now to see who his master is.
Yeah.
I'm really, really curious to see like who his master is, because
I mean, it's interesting if you're right about the Vanessa Rowe connection, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then that puts him outside of the lineage of Tenebris and Plagueis, right? Which and we do know that there is one more actor, I can't remember his name, but the actor who actually played Martian Manhunter in the CW DC shows.
Oh yeah, I did see that. People on the Star Wars subreddit were talking about like,
and he has a great voice.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
He's got potential to be the great voice of a Sith Lord or something like that. But yeah, if he is part of the lineage of Ren, or if he is just a fallen Jedi, I mean, like they even like Venestra kind of implies with the little lackey guy of has Soul become a fallen Jedi. So like they have this idea of what it means to be a fallen Jedi. If that means they think Soul has gone evil and has killed all the other red shirts and Jecki and Yord. It's interesting.
Yeah, I think that's so I think another thing too that I do want to kind of see is, and not that it has to, but I mean the whole just exploring more of, just like I said earlier from the beginning, like just exploring more of the Jedi, the Force, the thread outside of the Skywalker, trilogy. Like explore these worlds, explore all these themes, explore all this stuff because it's such a massive universe, so much history. It's like let's look into that more, and I think that's like with Ahsoka. That's one of the things I loved about Ahsoka was like with Balon, and him trying to like find out about the origins of the Force. Like I can't wait to see where that's going. So I just want to explore more of the world and more of the lore. And like if it is either first Night of Ren, then hey, I'd love that. So I absolutely would love that.
I have a feeling this next episode is going to be another like this is going to be the other side of the Rashomon flashback, right? Maybe it will start with Soul's narration, and him explaining what happened on his side of things, and what is this big reveal. I also kind of wonder, we've also got this setup that Osha is playing with her own force powers in that deprivation helmet. Could she ultimately like connect to her sister, and also and that's like how she learns whatever Soul tells May,
yeah,
and whatever deception that she has been living under too, right?
Almost like it's she's gonna find out the truth on her own kind of
I
thing.
mean but through the connection to May, right?
Well,
the helmet amplifies her force powers. She immediately connects to her sister because that's the whole always one but born is two, right? Yeah.
And then she sees her memories, shares the memories. Yeah, I could see that. I definitely could see that where they're
now do you want to hear my crackpot theory, which I don't think is
the crackpot theories.
Okay, so I don't think this is what it is, but one theory I had, right, particularly as we've had these teases on memory wipes and whatever manipulation and whatever dark side lie that Soul tapped into, right, is that what if it was that he didn't think that May fell into the pit, that maybe, or okay, actually, maybe that doesn't work.
He thought he was saving May.
He thought he saved, maybe he saved May, but then wiped her memory so that she thought she was Osha, and vice versa.
So he wiped both of their memories.
That's the only way it would work, right? If you wipe both their memories, and so you have Osha waking up on the planet and thinking she's May, and then on the other end of things you have May, who we know like her internal like true nature is a little more aggressive and a little more dark, right? Which is why that's like manifesting in her vengefulness and stuff, right? Like I said, it's a crackpot theory, but it was like an interesting idea.
I like it, but how about this then? Is what if it's a variation of that where he wipes her memory because she was really the one that killed through some kind of weird thing.
Oh yeah,
she's the one that killed everybody, and he wiped her memory because he wanted to save her from all the trauma.
Sure.
Right? That it really was that she was really the one that
she's killed everybody.
She was somehow she was responsible for the deaths, and then maybe maybe the memory that she has of May starting the fire was really her starting the fire.
Right.
That eventually led to everybody's death.
Well, right? Also, right, we also don't know what the ascension was, right? The whole ceremony, and we know that May finished the ascension and Osha did not. So what was that about? Is that like them becoming more connected, or getting more power? I
always thought it was them becoming full-on witches, like you become like a full-on Jedi.
Well, right? Yeah, they say that it's it could be just like Force switch bat mitzvah, but it still seems to imply that she is tapping into they're supposed to be feeling the power of Benny, right?
Yeah.
So
But it
what
also,
does that mean?
yeah, and then it also brings up the thing is like, you know, just by the nature of the Immaculate Conception, you're already going into the whole messianic Jesus, you know,
I mean, we still
mythologies,
don't know what the
right?
what the virgin birth is, right? Like
Right,
it could be we could be something else. We
yeah.
don't quite know.
But my saying it, but by bringing that up and saying that is, you have that in the prequels, right?
Mhm.
Was the prophecy, you know, Anakin was supposed to bring the balance to the Force, right? So he was
Right.
immaculately conceived. Now you have that same sort of imagery and same sort of like ties. So these two were supposed to be this coven, sort of like saviors,
Mhm.
right? You know, the saviors. So not only like their way of life died as well, right?
Right.
So it wasn't even just like, so you know, and going back to what Dale is saying, it's very much like the imperialism, colonialism. It's like killing out, you know, not just literally killing people, but literally killing cultures
Yeah.
and ways of thought, you know, and then that's why these Jedi became the most dominant thing, right? And so I know we're getting way more deeper into that, but and then this brings up another thought of mine too, is like there's so much that they're opening up, right?
Yeah.
They're introducing, they're other stuff, and there's only like 2 more episodes.
Well,
And
and
then
of course we
obviously
know
there's gonna
that.
be more seasons. There's gonna be
Well,
more seasons.
we don't know that, right? I mean, because I mean,
Mhm.
ultimately they went into this not knowing if they would get greenlit for a second season.
Yeah. And they're
So
treating it like a murder mystery.
yeah.
Right.
So they
like,
are going to have to
obviously,
resolve stuff
yeah.
and still leave Steve threads that they could still explore, hopefully in a season 2, if the 13%
Yeah.
Rotten Tomatoes score doesn't, you know, have
I
its
mean,
way.
that's totally that's a review bomb. So
Yeah.
even Headland, she came out and said, it's like, well, that's just par for the course. That's just how things
Yeah.
are now. It's just, everybody should know review bombing happens. That's what happens, you know, review bomb. And it's true, man. Like I mean, even today when I looked up for the promo, I was looking up soundtrack, Acolyte soundtrack, to put the soundtrack behind the promo.
Mhm.
You just type in Star Wars Acolyte in on YouTube, and the first thing comes up is just like all the hateful views, you know, all the hateful stuff, right? Like literally this is the first thing that shows up. So it's like,
Well, and
if
that
you
said, you know,
that's the thing, is like it's the algorithm. It's not the hate stuff drives the algorithm, right?
so
The trolls
I will
drive
say
the
this.
algorithm. It's not you don't get Star Wars Explained isn't the first one that pops up because it's like it's positive, you know?
Yeah.
It's like you literally have to, you know, it's like, and so I mean, there's a whole other conversation that I think as podcasters should have a discussion just on the fandom, like the state
Yeah.
of the fandom. Like, why is it the way it is? Just kind of like, I would be fascinated to have that conversation with everybody.
Well, and you know, and this is kind of one of the unfortunate things about this is that, you know, I'm really enjoying the show. I will not say it's a perfect show,
no,
right?
I won't
I
either,
mean,
yeah.
you know, we've already talked about, you know, there are some production value things. There's definitely some pacing things that are annoying. And you know, you can feel the strain of the streaming series format that is cutting
The length
episodes
of the
short. That is,
episodes,
yeah.
like it's like what,
and the thing
20, like the longest one is like what, 35 minutes.
Well,
Like,
and the thing is, it's like now you can't like talk about that objectively because now it's like, oh, are you buying into,
the
you know,
hate.
the hate?
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, I just want to be able to talk about it without the culture war, guys. Come on. I can't. I just want to be able to approach it critically, like truly critically.
No, you know, I agree with you because, yeah, it's not, you know, if I were to have to rank it, not that I'm ranking them right away, but you know, it's the way I look at it. It's like
I'm ranking this under Andor personally. I gotta say,
Andor
which actually,
for sure, yeah, Andor
which
for sure is number one for me. Out of all the live action, the newer Disney Plus stuff, right? Andor is number one for me by far, easily by far. And then I would say this, then Mandalorian for
yeah,
me.
or like Mandalorian season 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Right.
And the thing is, you're right. You're very right about that. And this is why I want to have that discussion. We should have like a fuller discussion just on like the fandom alone.
Yeah.
Because it's true what you just said. Like you can't be critical of it with it. Because here's my point is like it's and I kind of go back to like, some of the writing classes that I took. One of my teacher, who's now become one of my good friends, she would always say, like, during the critique, you have to critique everybody else's work, right? That's how the writers' workshops work. Everybody sits there. The person that's writing has to sit there in a cone of silence. They can't say a word. Everybody goes around the whole class and says, like, oh yeah, this worked for me, this one. But one of the things she always said was, you cannot do nitpicks.
Yeah.
You talk about the writing, you talk about the structure. He's like you can't nitpick things to death because that's not constructive and all that stuff. What's happening now, and we kind of brought it up earlier, the Wikipedia entry of Kathmandu, right, is a nitpick.
Yeah.
Is a nitpick. It's like you can't. Oh, big deal. Like, oh, it went from this color to this color. Big deal. You know what I mean? It's like in the greater scheme of things, like, yeah. But can you also say, yeah, the production value wasn't that great? Yes, you can say that. But also, you can say it in such a way that you're not, oh, this is horrible.
Mm-hmm.
There's such a
well, and it's
absolute, forgive me of like using the but it's true. Like people are using these absolutes to make it be like, no, it's like, yes, this could be better. This was good. This isn't. But everybody focused so much on like, oh, the chant was weird. So, oh, that episode was dumb. It's just like they
it's woke Star Wars. It's like, oh.
Yeah, they fixate on these things, but it's like you're coming into it's almost like a Rorschach test to you. Like it's become like a really big Rorschach test. It's like everybody looks at it and sees like, oh, they see what they want to see.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They come in with these things. It's like, but you know what? It's like, be critical, find the things you enjoyed about it, but then also the things that you don't like about it, just say you didn't like it. You don't have to go into this whole, and I want to share this, and I'll share it sometime on our socials, but I literally saw this clip of Kevin Smith the other day, and I'm bookmarking it. I'm going to watch it probably like every week from now on until the rest of my life. But basically he said, I'm totally paraphrasing, but he basically said, I had a heart attack 8 years ago. I used to go into this whole thing about like, oh, I hated this, and here's all the reasons why I hated it. I used to do that. It was like, man, I had a heart attack. I don't do it anymore. It's like, if I don't like it, okay, I don't like it. That's it. I'm just going to talk about things that I enjoy. I'm just going to talk about the things that and there's a little toxic positivity there, but at the same time, it's more of like, man, life is too short. You know what I mean? It's just too short to be like, man, there's so many other shit going on in the world that if we're going to fixate on these things and like send death threats to a Wikipedia editor, like, what are we fucking doing? You know what I mean? Like, come on, right? So, and I'm say this tonight, and I know it's just you here, but I want to say this to Tracy, Lexi, and Jason as well. It's like, the one thing I love about you guys is like, you always do find the good things to say about it, but we're also pointing out like, yeah, this didn't work. But we're not like, oh, this didn't work, and then going on a 20-minute diatribe about like how horrible it is. You know what I mean? It's like, it didn't work. Okay, move on. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know. Anyways, that's my little rant.
I appreciate that, and thank you for sharing it. I totally agree with you, and all we can do is, we will consume what we want to consume.
Yeah, and enjoy. We want to enjoy. If it doesn't,
it's also just interesting, right? Because and this goes back to things we used to talk about with Bencha at the very beginning, right? Mm-hmm. Is that it also speaks a lot to how storytelling has morphed in a really fast way because of the advent of streaming, because of the different kind of consumer patterns, right? And it is kind of a thing of, you know, how you utilize your TV budget, your television size budget, is, you know, I mean, clearly they threw a lot of money into fight choreography and rehearsal time for episode 5, and of course set design and construction and implementation suffered for that, in favor of that rehearsal time with actors to learn all of that choreography, right? um Great, I accept that. It's TV, right? um you know, just like, you know, there were definitely things where, like, okay, in the Kenobi series, it's like, okay, the janky CGI on the ship that Vader pulls out of the sky, right? But you know, that's because they were doing, you know, it's like, there's a balance, and it's like, okay, we sacrifice one thing for the other.
And I think the other thing too is, like, like you were saying with Benja about storytelling, because there is so much out there and has been for
long form, short form, episodic.
I mean, starting, you know, I saw
serialized.
Lost is coming up on its like 20th year anniversary, right? And that era started like the peak TV, right? You had BSG, you had Lost, you had West
Buffy,
Wing,
and
Sopranos, Buffy, all that stuff. And now we're at this point now where like the storytelling is super sophisticated now. Like storytelling is, and as audiences, we are definitely more in tune to like better storytelling, this stuff. But I think also I don't think what hasn't evolved is the fair-minded criticism of things, right? Fair-minded criticism.
Because some of
I
it
don't think it ever will. Because
I think some of those criticisms are really more about form than it is about craft, right?
Mhm.
If you accept that this is going to be a long form, then it's not going to resolve things per episode. It's not there are going to be hanging threads. Things are going to be in an act structure, and that will leave, you know, things unresolved or you know, hanging.
Yeah, and another thing, you know, going back to my writing class, you know, one my teacher, she would always say, like, critique what's on the page. Like, critique what's on the page. And in the same way, what we do too, what we should be doing is like, we can only critique or comment on like what is on the screen, what is being said to us. Like, and then as a whole, right? Not like you see one episode, then all of a sudden be like, they're ruining Star Wars. You know what I mean? Like, you know, that kind of stuff. So I don't know. It's just
and that said, I still feel like every story beats feels informed by the last, right? It's like everything is, you know, happening. This happens, and because of that, this other thing happens. You know, there are certainly some moments where I'm like, okay, maybe it would have been nice to develop this character relationship a little bit more, but then, oh, okay, so those people are dead now. That's why, right? You know. And now it's like, okay, so that's why we're focusing on the grief of Soul. We're focusing on, you know, the path of Osha and May. You know, I mean, it's still plotting out as a whole, right?
We probably should wrap, but I do want to like hit up some of the comments. I know
I was gonna say,
still around.
Do we have other comments that we missed?
Going back a little bit further, it's like, Tamir tells Osha that there's more ways to access the Force than the Jedi way, and I think that resonated with her because she felt that way with the witches, right? So,
I mean, for that, that's right, because she ultimately was deviated away from the witch's way of the Force too. So it is vice versa.
Yeah. And then Kevin says, you know, I cut my hair through the whole pandemic and it was never that easy.
I know you gotta wonder, okay, did the soul not know the smell of burnt hair?
Yeah, right. Like, did it not like singe the hinges? Like, you know what I mean? But like, you know,
but that's I mean, you know,
nitpicky to me, but
See, that's the fun. To me, that those are
the
fun
yeah,
flaws,
they're fun flaws. Those are
right?
fun things. Have fun with it, right? Yeah,
Yeah, like
not
like
like all of a sudden like that's an
what
example of why Disney's ruining Star Wars.
yes.
Right? Like
How is it that we've never
example,
seen a toilet in any? Well,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it took us what 40 years to see a toilet on any starship.
Well, like even in Andor, like there was
Yeah.
implied sex, right?
Yeah,
Like
right.
that was the first. I'm pretty sure that's the first time there was implied sex. And then this one is like not implied. I mean, she saw the D. Osha saw.
That's right. Oh gosh, that reminds me. Yeah, that was the whole thing with the first Star Wars with A New Hope when it was first released. The producers were like, shouldn't the Wookiee wear pants? And they said, no, the Wookiee's not going to wear pants. It's like, but that was totally an executive concern of put pants on the Wookiee.
And then Kevin also says, I think there's going to be more to putting on the helmet, more implications than just seduction of the dark side.
Mm.
I think I'm excited. I'm excited to see more. Just more Star Wars, the better, honestly. And more exploration of the non-Skywalker saga, the better. Yeah, for me.
It's funny. Even some of the reviewers that I've seen that are not, this is not their favorite show. There is so much lore discussion I'm seeing that it's like, that to me is also saying something when even the naysayers are like really kind of drawn in by what are the implications of the lore dumps and how it affects, everything we know. It's like, it's a lot of new stuff. And I think that is actually very exciting to lots of folks.
Yeah. Yeah. And then like, just like the whole High Republic of it all, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, sorry, I was cutting off your chin. It was bothering me. And then, just the whole exploration of the High Republic. I know we talked about like, we read the first novel. I do want to go back and start reading more of those, but like, and because a lot of people, on Twitter in the Star Wars communities, they're saying that like that's what High Republic is all kinds of stakes.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people dying, a lot of so I think that's really cool about it too. It's just like there's more stakes. There are higher stakes. There are, the red shirt of it all, like that was just,
Well, I think, I also know, I mean, I've seen commentary from people who have been still following High Republic pretty close. And the implications because I think in High Republic, Vanessa Rowe is still only a teenager.
Yeah, I did see that.
So
and she had the whip and everything, and she's so if
she's like 70 or 80 in the show, right? So I mean, it's also just kind of interesting. Okay, are they setting her up as, what led her to darkness, or is she darkness, or just like the corruption of politics? Politics will corrupt anybody,
Yeah. And and people make people, I think that's the theory. Oh, let's end on this. Who is your vote? Who do you think is the master? So assuming, again, we already have evidence that the one actor has not shown up yet.
Yeah.
So it could be that there's somebody we haven't seen yet. What they're going to do soon.
I am quite befuddled by this because the hints kind of lead towards the, well, I mean, gosh. Yeah, it's like there's hints that he is a fallen Jedi. There's hints that he is either the founder or of the lineage of the Knights of Ren. But of course we know that there's a rule of two in effect. So is he like a branch off of Plagueis, or it's like it's interesting. So I'm pretty befuddled, honestly,
because one of the explanations I was seeing was that the reason why they believe the Jedi, the Sith were no longer extinct for thousands of years was that all the eyewitnesses to the stranger
Right.
die.
That and presumably
Right.
Vanessa Rowe is going to cover up still, right?
That
I mean, and this kind of leans towards the
her being
possibility that
she's the master.
well, no, not that she's the master, but ultimately whatever happens, she's going to just pin it on Soul, and Soul's going to die. It's like Soul just went crazy, right?
Or memory wipe people.
Right.
The people that do know or have seen something. So
I mean,
my vote, I think it's her.
You
is
do
the master.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's
well, okay, that
her
she's
as the
Chimera's master, or that she is a Sith master.
that she's Chimera's master.
She's Chimera's master. Yeah.
Yeah, that essentially she's Chimera's master, and the reason why she's already setting up the oh, we gotta keep this on the hush hush, is that part of it is self-preservation for her. Right. So,
because Chimera does have some interesting language about, you all have darkness too. I just embraced it. Right.
Yeah. I mean, we all do. So it could.
Yeah.
So there's either. Okay. How about let me be more specific. Is it somebody we've seen or someone we haven't seen yet? What's your vote?
Chimera's master or the Sith Lord?
Chimera's master.
I'm gonna say I think it's someone we haven't seen yet.
Okay.
Just to be different. Because I mean, it is so interesting that we see the scar. It doesn't look like a straight slash or a straight line of a lightsaber. It does look like a floppy little zigzag that is consistent with the whip that we saw, one or two scenes before. It's also interesting that her lightsaber whip is purple, right? Which and at this point, canonically, we only know of two purple lightsabers, Mace Windu and her, and the implications that it's a blue lightsaber with a hint of red because of a hint of dark side, right? I think what is it? Mace Windu is supposed to be master of the Vapad lightsaber form that is supposed to be utilizing dark side, and that's why it goes purple.
But the real truth is Samuel Jackson just wanted a purple lightsaber.
Yeah.
Like, they just
I'm a bad motherfucker. I'm gonna get purple lightsaber.
Kevin says that I think there's a possibility that his master is long gone.
That's that's the interesting thing to me too.
So maybe the
right?
flashback. If there's a flashback, it's that actor that hasn't shown up yet.
He also drops that hint. He also drops that hint that implies that he's a lot older than he seems.
Yeah, he does.
Right.
Say that.
I mean, and it's also interesting in terms of, as we know, in other media, like the dark side is always kind of obsessed with immortality.
Yeah, like Palpatine
as a true
clone, right?
act of selfishness, right? So like
Snoke
whether
was
that's
like really old and decrepit.
Well, and I mean that's the difference. Yeah. I mean, of course, we've seen Palpatine's dark side makes him look like a space racing man, but somehow Chimera is like svelte, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, I think it makes me think too. Like, well, how old was Mace Windu, right?
Yeah,
like maybe, yeah. I the possibility in this, like, I think it's awesome. I can't wait to watch more and see more.
Yeah.
I will say that one of my biggest critiques, if I am to be critical, it's just I think the episode links are just too short. And
the what? Oh yeah,
the episode links are too short, and it does. I think that's what's causing the pacing issues.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
well, and it's
it,
kind of a thing where it's like, yeah, you can feel points where it's like this is a screenplay that wasn't quite edited, so that they could still keep the episode count up, right?
and it might have been just literally like what we like Disney by came in and was just like, you gotta cut, you gotta make cuts. We don't have, there's budget for this
Well,
and
no,
that.
I don't think they cut. I think they stretch things like
Oh,
right.
you
There's
think they
like
stretch?
yeah, I
Oh,
think it's like
it was like a movie, and then they just stretch it to be
I mean,
more. Yeah,
honestly, like just like with the structure of what we've seen, yeah, like you could have cut, you know, most of the Soul and May storyline into like one scene, and it would have made that whole extension of Soul revealing his secret a little bit less onerous, right? You could have combined, you know,
yeah,
uh, I mean, you could have combined, half of episode 5 with episode 4, and then the other half of episode 5 with, this episode, so that you still have a little bit of action spread out amongst 2 episodes, and just shorten the story points that are happening.
yeah.
Because
And then going back to Andor, I think that's why Andor works because they're structuring it in a way for episodic TV.
yeah.
You know,
It's well, I mean, I would argue like Andor is very strictly 3-act screenplay structure with each episode, being a different act, right?
Yeah. Or like
Um,
how they say it, like the first, if each 3 episodes were like a movie,
right.
like three movies, and then they're now even saying that they're breaking it up by like I think the 3 to 4 episodes is 1 year, and then
Right.
they do a jump to like another year. So in season 2. So but the point being is that you have more time. There's more time for character development. There's more time for things. I know a lot of people were complaining that there was too much time and people thought it was too slow. But honestly, we're talking about structure. I think what Andor was doing is way better. And then what Disney Plus Star Wars and Marvel Disney Plus stuff is what they're doing wrong is they are treating it like movies, just stretching it out, and they're not approaching it as a TV storytelling medium. They're just treating it as like a long 6-hour movie, right?
But I mean, that is to say though, I still think that WandaVision worked as
was
have
great. Yeah.
as also like both seasons of Loki, I thought worked, right? It was
Mhm.
kind of like where you're starting to kind of see, the plot, the story gets a little thin in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and some of the other properties, but yeah, it is interesting. But
Cool. Yeah, we should
that
get
said, we
going.
should probably wrap up.
Yeah.
That said, you do bring up some interesting things. Talking about Andor, they have announced that Krennic will be in the series, which is kind of exciting because I love that actor.
Say it again.
He is great. Krennic, director Krennic is going to be part of the 2nd season of Andor.
Oh, nice.
Um,
I can't wait for Andor season 2. I cannot wait.
Well, God, I mean, and well, yeah, allegories in real life, but the other kind of what was the other interesting tidbit? Oh yeah, that there apparently has been a casting announcement that someone saw that seems to describe their recasting Balin.
I did see that.
As well as casting the mother, which is interesting and adds credence to the theories that what Balin is after is connecting with the mother, who of course wants to destroy the Force itself, right? Which is interesting and cool. Okay, how how will Mortis gods, translate to live action? It's like, okay, interesting. More interesting,
but
more
that I love
crazy
that they're
mythology.
going there, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just love that they're going there. And so yeah, I did see that, and I did, and I'm okay with it. As much as I love Ray Stevens and R.I.P. and he was great, I loved him, Titus Pulo, but like you could tell that's where he was going with it, with the character.
Yeah.
That was going to be a major theme in the series as a whole. You can't just like not have him,
Yeah.
or write him out of the show. Like you need to that's the end. So.
But talk about shoes to fill, man. That poor actor, whoever they cast.
Well, they number one, I saw, on the Stars Reddit, they were saying Leaf Schreiber,
I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah. So they were saying him, and I could see it. I think there were some other people. I'd have to look at it, but there were some pretty good candidates. But he definitely, I think he would be really, really good. I think he's he's definitely older now, than he was in even the Jack Ryan movies, right? He played he played Clark in the Jack Ryan movies, and he's definitely older now.
And Sabretooth.
Yeah, and Sabretooth, right? So I could definitely see that. So but yeah. Anyways, we should me, Andy, we could geek out about things forever. But
right on. So that's it. That's our show. Thank you for joining us here on the Geekish Network. Please follow the Geekish Network on YouTube, Facebook, and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for joining us here on Monday nights. We're gonna let's hear. Can we make it next week?
Hopefully
we'll make it next week.
Hopefully we'll make it.
I apologize. I've been really busy.
Yeah,
of course, with Tracy's.
We apologize. We've had a lot of like real life challenges between all 5 of us. Scheduling wise and tech issues and stuff like that. But we hope to definitely be back next week. But
I think after tomorrow night, we're gonna have a lot to talk about.
I think so too. I think so too.
So once again, yes, we are the Pod Squadron. Please check all our content out on podsquadron.com. Like and subscribe. Follow us on X, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. For podcast subscriptions, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast app. I am the Chinese Pirate at Chinese Pirate _ on all platforms. We had the Feral Geek on with us earlier. And Rodney, you want
to just everything. Rodney Cahuto, my personal socials, but basically anything you see posted on the Geekish Network socials, that's me. Me and Chuck, so I run that. We help run that account. But we got Geek Beast Wednesday, and I think Bingeworthy on Wednesday. They're talking about Supercell, which apparently is a really good Netflix TV show that was like #1 in trending over the weekend. And it's like a black superhero to everything, sci-fi joint. I'm not sure exactly. I'm not too familiar with it, but I heard it hit like #1 and 2 in trending on Netflix over the weekend. So I'm excited to hear what they had to say about that.
Right on.
And so we're definitely trying to improve things here. We've been doing it for a while. Trying to improve things in the back end, and hopefully we have more content and really cool shit for you guys, more cool geek shit for you guys.
All right. All wings return to base. Course laid in and prepared to make the jump to light speed on my mark. And remember, the truth we cling to depend on our own point of view. Only the Sith deal in absolutes. Good night.
Night.
Thank you.